Took me a long time to get that message. And I'm not alone. I have a tiny other problem today. I have lost my reading glasses. So, I can either see my sermon or I can see you. So I'm going to go with my sermon, if that's okay. So just know I know you're out there. You and I, we are hardwired for connection. Totally, completely. God made us psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually hardwired for connection, for love, for belonging. Connection is why we're here. It's what gives purpose and meaning to our lives. Can I get an amen? Amen. Shame is the fear of disconnection. It's the terrible fear that there is something inherently about us, or something we have done, or something we haven't done, that makes us unworthy of connection. It's the feeling that makes us believe the lie that we are somehow not worthy, that we are not good enough for love, for belonging, or for connection. Shame is the intensely painful feeling of believing that there is something wrong with us, and that something makes us unworthy. And there is only one thing that can free us from the power of shame. Will you pray with me, please? God, as we pray together this day, as we come here with our different experiences of you, as we come here, God, with our different theologies, things we've been taught that have been helpful, things we've been taught that have destroyed us and broken us. As we come here today, God, sometimes with our confusion or wondering where you are, God, remind us that wherever we are here in this moment, you are meeting us right here. That you are right here. God, help us to give ourselves the permission today to be with you. And may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts draw us, God, so deeply into your love that we finally begin to know just a tiny bit of who you are. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So the story that we heard this morning in the Gospel of Luke, it's actually in all three of the synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and all three tell a slightly different version. The version we heard this morning in Luke was about this woman whose entire existence is defined by shame. It says that for 12 years she has been hemorrhaging. And to the best that theological scholars can know what that's talking about, it's probably vaginal bleeding. And the fact that it is difficult for me to say that points to my own shame as a woman and the shame that our society instills in us about our bodies. Women, can I get a witness? Yes. Perhaps she was hemorrhaging for 12 years after childbirth. We don't know, but she was suffering. And a little detail that Luke leaves out is Mark tells us she had spent all of her money on doctors, and nobody could help her. But her illness, far from just costing her her money, it cost her far more than that. It cost her her dignity. It was literally extracting her lifeblood, her birthright as a child of God, because it was keeping her hidden, because her condition was so connected to shame. As a woman in that society, and I would say as a woman in this society as well, just probably more pronounced back then, she was already unclean by bleeding every month. But because she was bleeding constantly, she was constantly unclean. For most women, just for a few days each month, no one could touch them. They had to go off and hide. They were unclean. Men, especially, could not touch the woman. Forget Kotex commercials. This was way worse. She was unclean constantly. Could not be touched constantly. Constantly rejected. And she couldn't have children, and so she was doubly unclean and worthless, because if a woman couldn't have children back then, she was nothing. She must have been so exhausted, not just from anemia in her body, but anemia of her spirit, of her heart, from lack of touch and lack of love and understanding and belonging from others. Something in her, though, somewhere along the line must have had enough, because she had heard about Jesus, and she had heard enough to say to herself, wow, if I can just scoot in there and touch him without anyone knowing, I can just do it secretly, if I can just touch his garment, he can't know I've done it, and I can't be seen. But I'll just try, and I'll scurry away before I've been found out. If I can just do that, maybe I can be made whole. And so she does. All three of the Gospels tells us that she just touched the hem of his garment, and she was made well. The hemorrhaging stopped, at least physically. And that, even physical healing, when you've been suffering like that for 12 years, that's a wonderful thing. But to be made whole, we can't be just physically whole or spiritually whole. To be whole, the two have to be united. She needed spiritual healing as well. And all three of the Gospels tell us that Jesus calls her daughter. I don't know if Jesus is calling anyone else daughter. He calls her daughter. And he says, your faith has made you whole. Your faith has made you well. But it is only the Gospel of Luke that tells us this. That when this nameless woman realized that she could no longer remain hidden, because Jesus had felt power go out of him. He was surrounded by a throng of people, and she had just down there on everyone's feet, had just kind of reached in and then went away. But he felt power go out of him, and he said, who touched me? And only Luke says these words. Luke says, when she realized she could no longer remain hidden, she came forward, literally shaking in her boots, trembling, and she fell down before him and told everything about why she had touched him. And it was at this point that Jesus said, my daughter, your faith has made you well. In that moment, she discovered she received the one thing that can break the chains of shame in our lives. Vulnerability. She made the choice to allow herself to be seen fully, including all that the world told her was unclean about who she was. Don't we all just love vulnerability? Must be getting something close to powerful because I need to sneeze. Sarah Helen knows this about me. I sneeze whenever I'm getting different foods. So we're in this series called Sermons by Request, and the sermon that was requested for today was on healing shame and learning about healing shame through the writings of Brene Brown. Who's familiar with Brene Brown? Brene Brown is an amazing social worker, researcher, professor. She's the author now of a number of books on healing shame and about connection and about belonging. I cannot recommend her books highly enough, especially these two, Daring Greatly and Braving the Wilderness. If you have not read these books, run, and get them. They're awesome. They're very real. They're very human. I began this sermon today with her words from Daring Greatly. So they're really important, so I'm going to say them again. She says, connection is why we are here. It is what gives purpose and meaning to our lives. Shame is the fear of disconnection. It's the terrible fear that something about us or something we have done or something we haven't done makes us unworthy of connection. For this woman whose name we will never know in the Gospels, her body was bleeding, and this is what made her unclean. It's what made people say, you are unworthy of love, of belonging in community, of support. You are on your own. Lea Brown, one thing that's so great about her is that she writes based on thousands and thousands and thousands of interviews she has done with people like you and me, all about what makes them feel vulnerable. And she said that in her research she has learned there are 12 categories related to shame. There's that number 12 again, seems to be a big one today. 12 categories related to shame. Appearance and body image. I don't have a problem with that one. You guys have a problem? Money and work. Class. Socioeconomic class. The great unspoken in our American society. Our heritage. Our families. Being parents ourselves. Mental and physical health. Addiction. Sex. Aging. Religion. Surviving trauma, and being stereotyped or labeled. Isn't it interesting that shame is about things we keep hidden, and yet, I don't know about you, but in those 12 categories, I saw just about every possible category of my life. Right? Was there any area of your life that isn't connected to the possibility of shame in that list? It's everywhere. Every area of our lives. None of us is spared. And Brene says, we all have it. If you don't have any shame, wow, please come and talk to me after the service. I'd love to know how you've done it. We all have it. Shame is universal and one of the most primitive human emotions that we experience. She says the only people who don't experience shame are those who lack the capacity for empathy and human connection, which is the definition of sociopathy. So here's our choice. She says, fess up to experiencing shame or admit that you're a sociopath. There's a nice choice. She says this is about the only time that shame seems like a good option. We are all afraid to talk about shame. And the less we talk about it, she says, the more control it has over our lives. Let's say that one again. The less we talk about it, our shame, the more control it has over our lives. I'm not sure how ready the woman was to take away the control that shame had over her life. Maybe she wasn't ready at all, and maybe that's why she decided to try to touch Jesus, but to stay hidden. And maybe that's why Jesus insisted on calling her out, lovingly. Because he knew her healing wasn't complete yet. I think he knew that if he didn't give her the opportunity to come out, the shame was going to stay one way or the other. But Jesus said in front of everyone, hey, who touched me? She could have run away in that moment, and I'm sure she wanted to, because she was so terrified she was trembling. She could have lied and said, well, me. That one over there. But she didn't. She made the choice right then and there to allow herself to be seen. And the version in the Gospel of Mark tells us that she told Jesus the whole truth. She just didn't say, oh, Jesus, I've been kind of sick, and I thought if I just touched your garment, then I'd be okay. She said, no. Jesus, I've been bleeding, hemorrhaging, like a woman bleeds. And I've been cast out, and I am unclean. And I'm at the end of my rope, and I'm all alone. And I know a woman should never touch a man, let alone a rabbi. But I was desperate, and so please, I'm sure she said, please forgive me, I'll go away, don't tell anybody. But he didn't. He said, daughter, your faith, your courage, your strength, this has made you well. This has made you whole. And he said that in front of everybody to an unclean woman. Oh, please, God, we'll do anything, but don't make us be vulnerable. Anything but that. Lea Brown says, vulnerability is the core of all emotions and feelings. That to feel is to be vulnerable, and to be alive is to be vulnerable. We can choose not to be vulnerable, but if we do, we choose not to be alive. Did you catch that? We can choose not to be vulnerable, but if we make that choice, we choose not to be alive. Just about all of us have had a moment or an experience where we have made the choice to stop living. Where someone or something has made us feel unworthy, and so we have just cut that part of ourselves off. I remember the first moment I experienced it. I was about 8 years old. My family, we had moved into a new house on Solano Drive in Phoenix, Arizona, Glendale. And right across the street was Jana Banks. Wonder if she's on Facebook. Jana and her sister Paige and her parents Jill and Steve and their dog Daisy. Amazing that I can remember all that when most days these days I can't remember my own name. And oh my gosh, Jana and Paige, they were so cool. Jana was a year older than I was. Paige was 2 years older than I was. Oh my gosh, they were like, cheerleader types, right? The opposite of what I was. And her family was so cool. My parents were in their 50s. And her parents were like parents should be, like in their 30s. I was born very late. My parents left. And her father, he worked at KOY radio station. And he got to do really cool things like hang out with the Phoenix Suns, the basketball team. I mean, they were just the epitome of cool. My family was the epitome of not cool. Lea Brown says in her book that the people she considers to be her friends are those who love her even though she's not cool. She said they're the people who understand and accept the fact that she has both Lawrence Welk and Metallica on her playlist. And I told Sarah Helen this morning, I don't even have a playlist. That's how uncool I am. I so wanted to be like Jana and Paige. And we did become neighbors, and we kind of became friends, at least till, our age difference got in the way with school and everything. But we were just getting to know each other, and one day, Jill asked if I wanted to go shopping with her and Jana, and I said, yeah, I'd love to. And my mom said I could go, so we went off to the department store or the mall or something. And they were just such cool parents, they were awesome. So Jill was shopping in the department store and taking her time. And I think if I've told this story before, please forgive me, menopause again. And Jen and I were getting kind of bored, so we started playing kind of hide and seek in the department store. We're getting kind of rowdy, and in our rowdiness, at one point, I threw my arms around Jana. And Jana, trying to be funny, she wasn't trying to hurt me, she thought she was being funny, she pushed me away and said really loudly, "Get away from me, you Leslie!" And Jill marched over to Jana. Now, the very cool parents who in a million years would never strike their child, slapped her across the face and said very loudly, "Don't you ever call Lea that again. She is a very nice young lady." Boom. And I started to bleed. My heart started to bleed. I didn't even know what a Leslie was. I was a really, really protected child. But I knew, right? Something was really wrong with me. And that stayed with me all through growing up. It stays with me to this day in some form or another. It takes a lifetime to dig the lies out of our bones, as Dorothy Allison says. And I bled and bled and bled for 15 years until the day came I found my way into an MCC. I found a whole lot of lesbians. And I've been working on my vulnerability ever since. The reason I wanted to tell this story today is in the last week since we made our big announcement that Sarah Helen and I will be leaving in a couple of months. Not everybody, but a few people have said, well, okay, I'm out of here. You know, love the church, but or to said, I just can't go to church. It just hurts too much. I can't do it. I could never cry in church. No. And that's a really common feeling among a lot of people. We can't cry in church. Have to be real in church? Who does that? Certainly not the churches we grew up in most of the time, right? But as I always say, if you can't cry in church, where can you cry? That woman, she could have chosen to stay home that day. And then when she touched Jesus, she could have chosen to run away, but she didn't choose to do either of those things. She showed up, and she took a stand for her own worthiness. She said, on some level, I'm going to go see Jesus because I am worthy of more than this BS that the world is putting me through. I am worthy of being called clean and lovable and friend and wonderful person and child of God. It doesn't matter what my body's doing. It doesn't matter who my body loves. It doesn't matter who my heart wants. It doesn't matter who has traumatized me, who betrayed my body. It doesn't matter what awful thing I've done, whatever it is, God can heal. And God's love is bigger than any shame anybody ever tries to put on us. And guess what church says that message better than any other church I know of in this world? It's MCC. And if you all aren't here, MCC will not be here. Pastors come and pastors go. It sucks, but it is the reality. That is the truth of being a pastor, and there are all kinds of reasons because of that, none of which have anything to do with anything wrong with this church. You are the church. Wherever Sarah Helen and I go, we will be the church, just as we have been the church here. God's love only gets to us through one another. And it is our faith in what we can do together through the love of Jesus that makes us whole. So I want to say today, if you are feeling afraid of what's coming, if you are really sad about what's coming, if you're really ticked off about what's coming, wherever you are, or maybe you're really happy about what's coming, whatever it is, bring it here and let yourself be seen. Share it together. Be vulnerable. Don't cut your heart off, because if you cut your heart off, you cut off God. God can only get to us through each other, through allowing ourselves to be touched and seen and be made whole. So I want you to know that's always going to be our prayer, wherever we are. For ourselves, too. It's a constant human practice. So let's choose together. Let's choose to walk this path together with this woman who came out of her shame and said, no matter what, I'm getting to Jesus. I'm not going to let anybody keep me away. I'm going to know God's not the enemy. I'm going to get myself there. I'm going to let myself be seen. I'm going to say I am not unclean. I'm going to have my feelings. I'm going to be together with God's people. I'm going to walk this path in this community because I am worthy of belonging. We are worthy of belonging. Do you believe that, church? Are you sure you believe that? Yes. Then let's be that for one another together. Amen.